welcome back to a new episode of the Muse podcast. I feel so much joy in the times we are living to welcome Dina Ghandour. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you so much, Maya. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for allowing the time, and we've been waiting for a little while for things to align since we touched base after taking part in the Lighthouse Summit. And somehow you were in my space and I checked in with you a few times. Can you share a little bit about yourself, Dina, to start with that?
Sure, yeah. Um, I guess first and foremost, I'm Palestinian, born and raised in the UAE, so this is pretty much home. Have found myself in the wellness space, working in it now for about a decade. I guess my passion really lies with working with women, specifically working with our bodies through movement, through connecting with nature, the cycles, the womb. I do healing, I do body work, I do yoga. So yeah, everything just about like coming back into the body and coming back home and remembering and reclaiming ourselves in every way that we can. And I'm really excited to be here just to like talk. There's so much that's come up from the last year and a bit for all of us, and I feel that these conversations are more important than ever.
Indeed, indeed. And, while checking in and somehow preparing for this episode, and it's not much preparation because most of it is really organic, it's raw, it's just tapping into what uh, people who have been on paths of be it wellness, be it healing, be it self exploration. I don't really like self development. And where are we at in the times we are living, especially being from the East, having visited the West in different ways, learning, obviously, investing, um, and tapping into how can we bridge things because there is obviously a split. And how do you feel about that when it comes to how are you revisiting wellness after specifically this year? Because this year is really the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot under the surface of the waters, and we are really going on those deep dives in those waters. And how are you revisiting wellness from the perspective of Dina, where you are at, and also relating to your roots as a Palestinian?
That's such a beautiful question, and it's also a very big question that I think, as you said, will continue to get more clear and develop with time and maybe more inquiry and more contemplation and more connection with like-minded people as we're doing now. I think what's changed the most is the lens through which I look into, yeah, the the arena of wellness. That like kind of lens has changed. I feel like, when you go to the eyeglass doctor and he like kind of like removes and he slots in and he's like, does it look clearer now? And you're like, no, not yet. And he like slots in new ones. Like, I feel like that's always happening. Is hopefully, like if you're on any professional, personal path, you try to continue to question and dig deeper and maybe re-question or rethink some things that think are status quo or you think are truth, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, like actually there might be more here that I haven't seen. Okay, let me like look into that, and where are my biases and where are my blind spots. And sometimes we just get into a bit of autopilot, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. Like at some point we need to just kind of put our head down and function And so while I think I've always been trying to adapt and flow and keep that inquisitive, curious mind, there was a long period where I was just kind of going with the flow, doing what I thought I should be doing, operating how I thought I should be operating within these spaces. And then Gaza and the genocide happened October 7th, and then everything changed. And I feel like those filters inside the glasses were just like, instead of just, maybe a change in the filter once every few years, it was like every week, every day, every set ideas. And ultimately, I feel like the clarity that's come, got such a powerful analogy, but like that's come is so strong, it's so big, it's so immense, and I'm very grateful for it. And I feel like it's allowed like a clearer vision of like, okay, hey, like what are the things that we have just maybe unconsciously taken as status quo or truth or the way things that should be done based on how we were taught, which is very much westernized, perhaps even colonized, capitalistic, consumeristic. And then, hey, what's the world showing me and how completely like delete and erase this? We were talking about that in our like little prep call. It's like, do I need to completely like throw this whole system away in light of the awakening of these new ways of seeing the world, the new lenses through which we look into the world? Or is there a way to kind of marry both until the systems aren't so harmful, which they are right
Yeah.
now? So I think that's really been the journey, and it's very much ongoing. And I took a break in last May, to kind of remove myself and give myself that time to say, okay, hey, wait a minute, like how am I colluding in some of these harmful systems unknowingly? Am I being too exclusive to like certain groups of people or body types with the way I teach or with my cues or the spaces I teach in? Let me think about my teachers and the lineage from, the yoga lineage that I'm teaching from, or the Reiki lineage or the womb massage lineage. Like, have those all been have I invested myself in those spaces in the right way, with the right intentions, with the right relationships? Am I giving enough reciprocity? So all of these questions are coming up, and I'm still in that like chewing, composting to life in January, but in general, just very grateful for those like new lenses and the clarity and um what the last year and a bit has revealed from that perspective. So yeah.
Yes, I hear you. I relate in many ways. When we sit with ourselves, the main thing is to, the references, that self-reflection, because I can also raise both hands when it comes to reacting to wanting the world to wake up, and um some of the responses that I received from so-called professionals in the field, at least of therapy, was, if we focus on the elephant in the room, we want to bring out all the subjects related to that. And at the same time, I was watching this as, is this the in, um, acquired reality that we are repeating over and over and over again? And is this an ongoing um, thing that we need to accept as the balance between the yin and the yang? At the same time, the more we see, the more we cannot unsee, right? And so how to balance both, seeing more, beyond the delusions that also we have been um, tainted by, um, and the fact that the truth is challenging, the truth is provoking, and how this shakes us again and again, and what is human and what is not. At the same time, tapping into colonization, tapping into indigenous, those two paradigms, can there be a certain integration while selecting, while filtering? What really works for us to be together and trust each other? And this is where I want to touch on with you, Dina, when it comes to the Eastern lineages, the Eastern uh, tribal connections, um, indigenous relationship, connection with the earth, connection with the land. There is a lot in our part of the world that that is already embedded. It just has been layered and layered and layered with obviously uh, everything related to what can be more famous, what can be, more presentable, what can have more Botox in it, right? And that's why we have the best clinics in the world when it comes to that. How do you see your relationship with what is indigenous for you? Also, you're living in Dubai, that dichotomy. And how are you also relating to the simplicity of um, life?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that question. There were so many beautiful pieces just in that question. I think the idea of, yeah, the indigenous question is something I didn't really consider. I think I didn't even think it applied to me in so many ways because even that word is associated with maybe, you think about like Native Americans, or you think about indigenous South Americans, or maybe people from other cultures. And I think that's also something that the last year and a bit has revived for us, is that we also get to claim this beautiful title, or this beautiful accolade, or even just this word. Like, we get to also sit together with this word because we too have a connection to land, and to specific lands that are now in the process of being, pillaged and raped and burned. And so I think it's a very new journey for me, but one that I'm really excited about. And I know that it's the beginning, and I know I'm just scraping the surface, like you said at the beginning, but I think it's really exciting. It's exciting to really discover what that could mean. Reclaim in the
And
conversations
yes,
that I have had with my family pretty much since birth. Like, it's been alive in every,
yeah, you froze for a little bit, but
all good.
yeah, we're still
Okay.
here. Mercury retrograde
Okay.
is
Keep
tapping
going
in.
with amazing. Yeah, like Palestine's always been alive in all of our conversations growing up. Like, it was always on the dinner table, like at night, in the morning, like it was very alive in our conversations, but perhaps not as much like the connection to like the physical place. Like, we didn't go visit often. It always felt like, oh, well, now's not the right time, and oh, now's not the right time, and now's not the right time. And actually, the first time I visited wasn't with my family, it was with the American dance company that I used to work for when I lived in the US, who had received a grant to perform in a contemporary dance festival in Ramallah. So the first time I actually stepped foot on the land was with Americans, which I think is very interesting. Um, and so it's a new space for me, new idea. It's something that I'm excited to start to build a relationship. UAE has been nice because it still feels close. Like, I still feel like I'm close. Like, I traveled to Bali recently, and I remember feeling just so far. And even though the UAE is very like far in many other ways. I just felt like, oh, I just want to go back to the UAE because it's like it just feels closer, like it's in the region, it's like nestled up like somewhere near it. And to be around the food and the culture and the language, I think has become so important, and I'm really recognizing the value of that in my life, because I can definitely now see how I was like, oh, well, I studied abroad and I wanted to like live abroad forever. And I wanted to make sure that I like operated in those systems because those were like the right ways to operate. And, I never wanted to come back and like, oh my God, like we're so behind and like, oh, like came back to the UAE and I was like, I can't believe like they don't recycle. Like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing, you know? And now I'm like, oh no, like I so appreciate all of it. I so appreciate all of it. And particularly this idea of um, a feeling of connectedness to a community, a feeling of connectedness to a tribe, a feeling of a connectedness to a culture, even language, food. I mean, all these like little these little bits, when we cannot root in our original indigenous place. So those are some of my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours.
It's beautiful. I mean, I think it takes distance to reconnect. And yeah, the journey that I was on was also related to I just want to step out to see things more from a different perspective because I was deeply entrenched in being a sponge in my family. And so that kind of surgery required other perspectives. And, this is where going from the East, Eastern practices to also the Amazon, that was the biggest chunk of my journey, really. And still, it was a transition into still deepening the connection with indigenous cultures and really respecting those practices. And this has many layers, especially when it comes to the West, how it's perceived. Uh, but at the same time, there was a reconciliation with the land always, um, where the people are at um, is disconnected from the land. Not everybody, but there's a different approach when it comes to the love for the land. And I feel that, in my journey, I also needed to accept um, the the polarity of those extremes of this is my land, this is your land, that tribal uh, uh, identification. At the same time, the animosity that was at play due to the layers of religion and ethnicities, and it is the internal uh, conflict that is reflected by other players that are it's a playground for others, and that's where looking at that hot zone, that every time I would meet foreigners, the first thing that would come is, oh, you're from Lebanon. And I used to feel, yeah, I would go into that contraction mode. Yeah, this is history, the story. Did the war end? There was always that question. And at some point, this last year and this year, when people would tell me, "Oh, you're from Lebanon," I would tell them, "Oh, you're from the U.S." Because we are all going through layers of deconstruction. It's just how it's presented and where the focus is on, with a specific narrative of this and that, the subhuman and the human. And this has been woven for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so acknowledging also that I did seek the learning from outside because there were no elders in my country that would guide me. And so I needed to step out,
Mm,
especially in my journey, and also to become more objective, step out of my story, being around people that do not know me.
mhm,
It takes time to know each other, but at the same time, recognizing that there is that need to step out in order to step back. That expansion and contraction. And this is where I still struggle with our our trials of you know um, explaining to the West what is going on, while we are still going through understanding what is going on, because there's so many complexities, and what is this triggering in us. And this is where I also want to relay that working with women, how has it been for you in terms of what what did that world bring even more when it comes to healing, wellness, community? I know my questions, or not my questions, the exploring world uh,
mm.
of wellness and healing and community are being redefined. And so how are we revisiting them? Because I have been just trying to understand and re-explore community for quite a while. Like, what is community? How can I really be with others while not losing myself? Because there is a tendency to just melt. This is part of also our signature, is that we merge with the collective and we forget about, that individuation. So how are you navigating this with women, being a woman, and re-exploring community?
Yeah, I think that with, I think I only realized that I think even like to the point where the work I was doing for a long time, some of it was like more about the community than it was about the work itself. Like I think for me that's just been so, I didn't realize, like I knew it was a how it was like the all that I do. And I think especially like with working with women and women's work, it just allows you to go, I feel like even deeper, even faster into like true, relational, yeah, like aspects of life. Like you can't not start to like think about the earth and the earth rhythms when we're looking at women's bodies and our rhythms. When you're, thinking about like, we're made from the same stuff, and then we have the same these like cycles and these inner seasons, and then we have these outer seasons, and we create life and it creates life. And so I feel like it's this beautiful like fast track way to find that remembering and to find that reclaiming, and also bringing back the ways that community did used to come together, that the women would sit together for long periods of time, months or for long hours in the day, and that they would support each other when they were ill, and they would support each other during their births and with each other's children. And there was something about these communities of women in these spaces where women spent time together, and tents where they bled together, and rituals and circles and whatever it might be, right? And so I think that there is something really beautiful in working in these spaces specifically. And I think for me, finding, almost trying to like recreate that somehow. It's like, how can I recreate what's been lost? Because it was there naturally. And now we're having to especially in, fast-paced, consumerized places where we're not living in a village anymore. People barely. Oh, I really miss that. Like nobody, everyone's like head down in their phone, like head down in the car, head down when they're walking. And so if we're living these
Yeah.
very like separate, fragmented lives, like in our own little bubbles, in our own little houses, like we're not in a village anymore, then we have to work extra hard to try to build and create these communities. And I think for me, yoga was the way to do that. It was a way of like, okay, well, I'm going to bring like-minded people to me every week for these classes and every month or whatever for this retreat, or for I would host like potlucks and dinners. And I was like, let's just like this desire, this like deep desire to just be like with one another in that kind of like, yeah, sacred community of people who are trying to seek something, find truth, experience life in a deeper way. And it's that just that like-minded filter that kind of, or that thread that connected all of us. And
Mm,
then I think you kind of come to this realization that then is the community based on some kind of like transaction. It's like, well, I offer a service and therefore you come and you're in these spaces, not just because, like, because I live in this neighborhood and this is where we tend to hang out because this is like the communal area for this zone or like whatever. So now we're having to like create these communities, and perhaps most of them are in this kind of exchange of some way. And of course, like it would be beautiful if it was some altruistic, mutual, exchange of like food, or still a lot of it is an exchange of some kind of transaction. And then the idea becomes, well, how does it work the other way? Like, do I get to ask something from you? Like, now do I get to lean on you as well? Like me as the person, like kind of swirling this cauldron of like people and bringing in this community. And of course, people are making their own connections, but it's like, so now do I get to also lean in to you in when I need something? And I think that's where it became really interesting in the last year. It's like, oh, I don't think so. Like a lot of these people are here for exercise. Oh, okay, they're not really interested in the spiritual stuff. Or, oh, a lot of these people are here for their own, they don't really, want to tap into like what's happening like outside of that. And then that becomes kind of interesting, and you start to think like, okay, well, like I have a community, but I can't really lean into it or on it. So then what does community mean, and how do we start to build it in a way where that foundation is a little bit stronger, is a little bit more, um yeah, I guess like there's what's shared is shared in a different way, and that's the big question.
mm, yeah, yeah, it's an ongoing question, and I really relate to what you shared in terms of we're still exploring. I think very much that we are still in seeing possibility to the extent that it's so much, so many possibilities in what will land, what will be, what are somehow what are we dreaming of
Hmm.
based on things that we think we knew from the past. As you said, we're not living in tribes. We're living in modernity. Um,
Hmm.
and there is so much information and so much being laid out when it comes to um, how to be, um, how to belong, how to keep focusing on yourself, putting yourself in priority. And I think, the world of wellness is still like evolving in so many ways. The concept of the guru that dropped,
Hmm.
you still, there's a lot out there where it's like what is really true, not only true, but what is true for me at the same time. What is true for me while I feel that I belong and I don't feel like, again, that same story of the black sheep, because there's, and we spoke about the black sheep, right, in the prep call. And there is that relatability to that archetype. At the same time, how come the black sheeps are not meeting? And why not um, meet in spaces where the challenging subjects are tackled instead of, again, those rainbows and butterflies and upper world dimensions and angelic realms? And how can we also, maybe as women, uh, explore the depth even more while welcoming the light? Because it's both. It's both and. So that when we speak to something, we're not really only considered that, dramatic or serious, because we don't want to get stuck into that world because there's muckiness in it, right? At the same time, how can there be a dance? And I love, I would love at some point to attend um, a session with you, and maybe in Lebanon. I don't know. Maybe we'll meet sometime in Lebanon. I have never visited Dubai. I was invited many times, and somehow I could not go. Um, and and how can we be in the presence of each other, as you're saying, while not defining each other as, oh, so you're falling, you're melting, you're being vulnerable, and I'm gonna just be here without even holding space for you. That whole concept of holding space has been also skewed. That I'm here to hold space for you. And this is also, in the world of shamanism, things are shifting dramatically. Uh, Everyone is holding space, yet we are not able to be in the presence of each other and not box each other. Oh, but she's into wellness, so she's supposed to. There's always that echo in the back of the psyche, which is she's not supposed to fall down.
Yeah.
And this is where
Mhm.
I think, we're tackling that realm of safety, where falling down has to happen on my own because I feel that I can trust few people to be with me while I'm
Mhm.
going through that. And so, this is where there's also that holding both realities, where if we cannot be here or I need to be on my own in this, can I ask for a sister or a friend to light a candle for me? Just
Mhm.
without anything, without any trying to fix or trying to pull anybody out. Because when we go through our journeys, there is also that, can I trust someone to hold that space for me in order to collapse?
Mhm.
And will I be judged in that
Mhm.
way? And it does take trust, and it does take, I don't know, maybe maturity. And I think we as women go through stages of life where age plays a big role. Uh, and yeah, it's part of that. I don't know if we can call it the whole hormonal cycle, but but it is part of that exploration of of who we are as women and how can we re-engage in those times. Gina, there's a lot to talk about. Thank you so much and I hope we can revisit again, another episode. Would you like to add anything before we close this episode for now?
seeing what fruits it might bear. And yeah, I think just ending with this idea of as Arabs, we have a lot in our culture around the collective and around community. And so I'm wondering how our future conversations might dig into the richness of what we already might have, and then kind of reimagining community and reimagining connection and reimagining belonging and reimagining holding space from some of that wisdom and some of that power, um, and yeah, seeing where it takes us. We're at the beginning, like you said.
Yeah,
It's exciting.
it is exciting. And the time of chaos, it is where when creation happens, really. And so we're deep in the waters of the feminine. Thank you so much for everything you're doing, Gina. It's a pleasure connecting with you, really. And I hope we can meet at some point physically, somewhere.
That
And
would be great.
yeah, yes, and I'll be adding um your coordinates in the description below, for people also to connect with you, because you do organize retreats, and I think there's a retreat in Bali that you're organizing sometime in February, right?
And yeah, we're going to Oman in February and Bali in April.
Right, right on. So yeah, check out Gina's information. Thank you, Gina, for everything. Have a
Thank you,
beautiful
Naya.
day, and
It was such
we'll
a
be in
pleasure.
touch. Yes, same
Definitely.
here, my dear. Habibti. Thank you
Take
so
good
much.
care.
Many blessings. Bye.
Bye.